evening, everyone. Welcome. Okay, I see the green light is flashing.
Is it on mute? There we go. Excellent. It's so wonderful when the program assistant is working back there with the audio while I try to have to run back and forth. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for playing parking spot bingo here at the Decatur Library. It's always interesting when we have something going and the rec center has something going and people enjoy the free parking the library provides for the entire city of Decatur and the restaurant retail district. No, that's not a snide comment. Welcome, my name is Joe Davidge. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. And on behalf of the Decatur Library and the Georgia Center for the Book, welcome to an evening where we're celebrating Eudora Welty. A couple quick reminders for next week's programming. Maybe come a few minutes early to try and find a good parking space. But on Monday, the 20th, if you were here last year, Mary Boyle and Ron Smith did a very interesting look about the history of brewing and brewing companies in Atlanta. And they're continuing with that theme with their new book called Prohibition in Atlanta. So now that we know the histories of all the brew houses and brewers that were here in the city, we're going to now find out what they did when Prohibition swept through our fair city. If you missed his program here a few months ago, Robert Weintraub will be at the Tucker Rekofer Library on Tuesday talking about his book, No Better Friend, which is a story about a dog that was in a platoon in World War II. And then continuing with our theme of debut Georgia authors that we've had this summer, Scott Hawkins will be here on Wednesday the 22nd, reading from his new book, The Library at Mount Char, a slight departure from our normal sort of either literary fiction or historical fiction. This one is a bit of science fiction. So always branching out here at the Georgia Center for the Book, which is what happened last year when Brooke presented the Flannery O'Connor reader, because it forced me to learn to say the word zine and not Twitch, as I did for a while. Why can't they just call them magazines? You know, it's like the younger generation. Why can't they just call them magazines? But this year, Brooke and Kate Medley and Emily Wallace have put together the Eudora Welty Reader. It is a fantastic compilation of art and words inspired by the art in the book and Welty herself. And she is just such an innovative and great, you are a great person to work with. And I enjoy her emails because every once in a while, Brooke helps to keep me humble by writing emails to Zach and I where she refers to us as dudes. So, you know, it makes me feel that I'm not as old as I am, and, you know, it kind of gives me courage that, you know, people are still looking at the great icons that we have in Southern literature. And you can see it on display in woodcuts and tin work and watercolors, how inspirational these people's words were, how art inspires other bits of art. So without taking any much more of her time and the reader's time this evening, please welcome the ever wonderful and genius Brooke Hatfield.
You're only as old as you feel, man. So hi, I'm Brooke, and along with my friends Emily and Kate, we put together the Eudora Welty Portrait Reader. Partially because last year when we did the Flannery O'Connor portrait zine, we had a few writer friends who wrote pieces that were responses to specific portraits that they read at a few release events. And then when the Bear Southerner ran a feature on the entire project and included those written pieces, and those written pieces weren't in the zine, it angered a woman in Texas, and she paid to return it. And but also we, you know, it was cool to see that people were interested in kind of art begetting art. And in the reader, we've got, you know, a wonderful essay about Welty as a photographer. We've got a hilarious monologue written by local Atlanta playwright Topher Payne. We've got a beautiful kind of homage to a fairy tale written by Laura Relier, who's going to read tonight, and we've got a poem, a type of poem called I'm going to mispronounce it, Ghazal? Puzzle. Yeah, which is a type of poem I've never even heard. So we're very excited about the project. You can get a copy back at the back. They're $10. All profits go to the Eudora Welty Foundation in Jackson, Mississippi, which is a great place to visit if you're ever in the area. So yeah, why Welty? She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of many books and short stories, a brilliant documentary photographer, and a proud daughter of Jackson, Mississippi. For those of us who grew up in the South and like storytelling, she represented not only what we knew, capturing the characters and cadences of our region, but also the range of what was possible, telling honest stories about a place that continues to struggle and progress. We had a preview party for the portrait reader at Eudora's house in Jackson a couple weeks ago, and Welty's biographer and friend Suzanne Mars joined us for the occasion and offered a truly lovely toast, which I would like to read for all of you right now. Eudora Welty, one of America's great writers of fiction and one of our great friends, is also a woman whose intellect, empathy, and generosity were evident in her beautiful eyes, in her smile, and in her pensive expressions. No wonder hers is the face that launched and continues to launch many a portrait. From the time in 1946 when Marcella Cromez Winslow said that Eudora had an eyelid fold like Greta Garbo, Eudora has inspired painters including Winslow, Paul Matthews, Carl Wolfe, Mildred Wolfe, and the 21 artists whose work is displayed here tonight. Let's raise our glasses to Eudora Welty and the artists who keep her image before us. You have to raise the glasses. So here's how tonight is going to work. You'll hear a performance of 3 of the 4 written pieces, and the portrait that inspired it will be projected over here. So let me get the first one up for you. This is Eudora's Selfie by the inimitable Natalie K. Nelson, who's here tonight. So Natalie draws, paints, bikes, and eats in Atlanta. Her illustrations have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Bitter Southerner, and many others. She is currently working on her first children's book, which I'm thrilled about. Reading a piece inspired by Natalie's portrait is Pearl McHaney, the Kenneth M. England Professor of Southern Literature at Georgia State University and the author of A Tyrannous Eye, Eudora Welty's nonfiction and photograph. So come on up, Pearl.
So I was thrilled to be able to receive this portrait, to be able to write about, to think about. So I titled my piece, Seeing Eudora Welty, Seeing. Eudora Welty has always had an eye for eyes. The rubber bridegroom, that she alternately called a fairy tale of the Natchez Trace, is replete with blinking, sleeping, batting, shining, rolling eyes. Eyes that are yellow, somnolent, large, worldly, sharp, or tearful. Maybe this is to be expected, so I checked another novel, Delta Wedding. There I found loving, seeking, swimming, opening, shutting, flickering, cutting, forgetful, slumberous, mischievous, soft, weak, wide, long, gray, hazel, dark blue, red, or lighted eyes. Again, not necessarily surprising, but in Delta Wedding, I came across this curious line. The grown people, like the children, looked with kindling eyes at all turmoil, expecting delight for themselves and for you. They were shocked only at disappointment. Kindling eyes? My own eyes were arrested at this strange and confusing adjective, and so I searched my American heritage, where my faith and trust in Welty's deliberate choices were rewarded. The 4th definition is to be stirred up, rise out of Old Norse to Middle English, to give birth to cause. Of course, I was digressing from my assignment here, but while I was there in the dictionary, I noticed that a kindle is also a litter of kittens. And the verb kindle in this sense is to give birth, especially to rabbits. Aha, I thought. The grown-ups and the brood of children in Delta Wedding, looking with kindling eyes at all the turmoil, expecting delight from the generations of siblings and cousins, all falling together for the week of the harvest time wedding of the prize daughter to the red-haired overseer, just as one might look on a crawling, mewling jumble of kittens. Now this digression emanates from my seeing artist, Natalie Nelson, seeing Welty as a photographer, peering into her living room mirror, using her camera as a mechanical eye to take a selfie, so that the observers might see, oddly enough, exactly what Welty sees. But we should be aware that in looking at Nelson's painting, we are being seen by Welty as well. This is Welty's genius. With her generous, observant, and discerning eye, Welty sees the complexity of human relationships and shows this turmoil to readers of her writing and viewers of her photographs. She does so, she explains, by rooting her characters in place. And, quote, it may be that place can focus the gigantic, voracious eye of genius and bring its gaze to point. Focus, then, means awareness, discernment, order, clarity, insight, that are attributes of love. The act of focusing itself has beauty and meaning, she writes. It is the act that, continued in, turns into meditation, into poetry. Indeed, as soon as the least of us stand still, that is the moment something extraordinary is seen to be going on in the world. Indeed, something extraordinary, like a bridegroom who is also a robber, or a wedding of a daughter of the plantation patriarch to his hired man, or Natalie Nelson drilling in on Welty taking a self-portrait, or us gathering to read and laugh and see anew one of the 20th century's finest writers. Welty recognized the powerful metaphor of the eye when she titled her 1965 essay about Catherine Ann Porter, The Eye of the Story. And the appropriateness of the metaphor might have rested had Welty not titled her collection of selected reviews and essays, The Eye of the Story. And now we have Welty, The Eye of the Storyteller, a collection of essays, and A Writer's Eye, collected book reviews, and A Tyrannous Eye, Welty's nonfiction and photographs. Importantly, Nelson portrays Welty as a photographer, alerting viewers of this significant talent of the award-winning writer. Welty, we now understand, pursued photography as a legitimate career in equal earnest with the writing of the fiction in the early 1930s. She was not deterred by not getting a job photographing scenes of government projects along with the now famous WPA photographers, Walker Evans or Dorothea Lange, Ben Shahn or Marion Post Walcott. She was not deterred when the New York publishers rejected her photographs of Southern African Americans and her collections of photographs and stories. What she did was to continue writing and taking photographs without an agenda and without an audience. When her first story, Death of a Traveling Salesman, was published in 1936, and then more and more stories found prizes and print and awards, Welty realized that writing was her vocation, and photography an advocation. Nonetheless, she exhibited her photographs in 1934 in Jackson, Mississippi, in 1935 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in 1936 and 1937 in New York galleries. Her photographs were published in Eyes on the World and in Life magazine in 37 and 38, in Mississippi, A Guide to the Magnolia State, and in 1944 in Vogue. Yes, Vogue. Finally, in 1971, Welty published 100 of her 1930s photographs in a collection she titled One Time, One Place, Mississippi in the Depression, a snapshot album. She showed slides of 32 of these photographs in 1973 for a program at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And since then, there have been many exhibitions and photographs printed in museum quality for collecting or published in academic studies and in limited and coffee table sized collections. Welty's photographs show people at work, at rest, in conversation and laughter. They show landscapes, parades, built environments of homes and communities. Some are anecdotal and some are formal, studies of shadow and line and perspective. Often, as illustrated in Nelson's painting, Welty's photographs are humorous. Imagine Welty in front of her mirror, framing herself against the flowered wallpaper, her hair and lipstick just right, balancing her clear, wide, blue, naked eye with the big black aperture of the camera, controlled by her long-fingered hand, ready to click before she has time to say smile. Such a photograph does not exist, so we are grateful for the imagined image caught by Natalie Nelson in her painting. The oval wood frame of Welty's selfie is as important as the camera eye. In her essay, Place in Fiction, which is about far more than place or the South, as is most often assumed, Welty writes, "We have seen that the writer, read artist of any medium, we have seen that the artist must accurately choose, combine, superimpose upon, blot out, shake up, alter the outside world for one absolute purpose, the good of his art. To do this, he is always seeing double, two pictures at once in his frame, his and the world's, a fact that he constantly comprehends, and he works best in a state of constant and subtle and unfooled reference between the two." Nelson captures a moment and frames it to hold it steady. She gives us, Eudora Welty, two pictures at once, bringing the writer and the photographer into the 21st century for us to comprehend anew as we read her work or see her photographs and find meaning in what her genius eye is able to show us. Thank you.
All right. When Natalie submitted this piece, I was like, Pearl has to write about it, so I'm happy that it worked out.
Could you have her stand up?
Natalie, where are you? Right back there. Yay! So just a little bit of information about the Eudora Welty Foundation before we move on to our next reader. It was established in the years before Ms. Welty's death to assist the state of Mississippi in preserving and celebrating the legacy of Eudora Welty, enhancing appreciation of her work, and encouraging the efforts of young writers. They do extraordinary work, which you can witness firsthand next time you're in Jackson, where Ms. Welty's home has been turned into a lovely museum. All of the proceeds from the sales of our reader project go to benefit the Welty Foundation, and we and they thank you heartily for your contributions. So, next portrait. Welty was a big gardener and had a green thumb that she wrote about a lot in letters to friends. And so when we were thinking about what types of portraits we wanted to include, we thought a flower arrangement portrait could be really nice. And luckily there's a woman in Athens named Mandy O'Shea who runs a floral design studio called Moonflower, and her husband runs a farm called Three Porch Farm. So these are flowers that they grew on their farm. And Mandy's work is a fusion of artistic expression and a love for natural rhythms. And reading a piece inspired by this portrait is Laura Relier, a writer who lives in Atlanta with her Boston Terrier, Wolfman Jack. Laura?
Hi. Ain't that pretty? I love this intro. Okay, so
year I had the honor of writing a little bit for the Flannery O'Connor project, and I was really excited when Brooke and the team invited me back on. So for this, I mean, you have to write a fairy tale about a portrait of flowers, right? So what I did was kind of an homage to Eudora was take the Robert Bridegroom and kind of do a mashup homage to it with another German folklore piece called The White Wolf. So this piece is kind of a reinvention of that story, The White Wolf, as I feel Eudora would have written it. So it's called The Wolf Room. No relation to my dog, Wolfman Jack. It was the close of day when a boat touched the vanished shore, and Clement, a mere merchant with a bag of gold, disembarked. His voyage from New Orleans had passed without incident, and he secured the sale of his tobacco before setting sail home to his wife and his 3 daughters. The sun was setting in an umbrous rage over the Wassaw Sound with a thick, downy blanket of indigo thunderheads above. The wind whipped about him with aggression, turning the port into a thick foam. He followed the line of torches along the dock to the boardwalk. Carriages and horses thundered ahead in concentrated silence, determined in their races to their destinations before the storm broke loose. Clement himself made his way into the first inn that he came across, and, after deeming it safe for himself and his fortune, ate an early dinner in solitude before making his way to his room for the night. The next morning, before starting the rest of his journey homeward, Clement and his freshly filled purse ambled into the town to buy gifts for his 3 daughters, each of whom were more beautiful than the last. For the eldest, he purchased a necklace rich in emeralds from the city's most renowned jeweler. For the second, a frock embroidered and fashioned with the most ornate beading and delicate pearls. Secured with these 2 fineries, he scoured the markets and florists for his 3rd gift, but ultimately resigned himself to gather a worthy bouquet on his way through the wilderness towards his plantation. His youngest and fairest daughter, Rosamond, had asked only for a wreath crowned of wildflowers. He traveled through the thicket and forest for miles before coming upon a clearing. In front of him, a rolling field burst with feathered petals of snowball viburnum, anemones, poppies, and heuchera. The ranunculus' downy bulbs seemed to turn their heads to greet him, and he gathered them gleefully into a fat bouquet worthy of his most beloved daughter. He plucked them with such fervor that he did not notice when he accidentally grabbed the tail of a large white wolf, which snarled at him, lip curled, guarding a wreath of its own. The merchant reached for the wreath boldly, driven by the whimsical thought of it perched atop Rosamond's head. "My lord," the wolf said, "you may have this crown, but only in exchange for the treasure of my choosing." The merchant held forth the purse from his belt. "No, gold bears no service to a wolf. I have a different treasure in mind. Give me the first living creature to cross your path on your way home. In 3 days I will collect it from you." The merchant imagined the herons and the chipmunks and the swallows that had crossed his path on travels past and consented, carrying the wreath away with him. However, much to his chagrin, his travels continued without disruption, and his final approach to his plantation, the first thing to cross his path, was his own Rosamond, anxiously awaiting his return on the red clay path to their estate. The reunited family evening passed solemnly, the merchant's promise looming over them, heavy and thick. That night he recounted his misfortune to his wife, who hastily formulated a plan. "How is this dreadful hound to know our daughter?" she asked. "We shall simply outfit the goat herder's sister and allow her to play the part." The expeditious wolf was prompt to retrieve his prize, arriving early on the 3rd day. He ascended the stairs where the bereaved merchant waited for him with the servant's daughter, the same height and age as his own beloved Rosamond, disguised in one of her decadent frocks with the cursed wreath on her head. The wolf lowered himself for the frightened girl to climb on his back. They left the palace without argument. They ran through the thick forest for some time, only pausing their journey for a rest once, in the valley where the wolf had first crossed paths with the merchant. "This is my land, and soon it will be ours," he said. The girl looked around, terrified, her gaze staring emptily at the fragrant blooms that surrounded her. "What do you suppose your father would do with such a place?" The girl paused and looked at the wolf. "My father? He would clear this field entirely, and the forest too. He would use the wood from the forest to sell as planks, He would let the goats loose to eat down the flowers, and then he would farm those fields. We would never want for anything again. Want? What could you possibly have want for now? Your father has had such endless success, the wolf said, the deception dawning on him. Good sir, my father is merely a lowly goat herder. The wolf angrily threw the impostor on his back and returned to the merchant's grape plantation. Outside the gate he growled, Dare to deceive me again, merchant, and your tobacco fields will rot. Your crop will turn to ash, and your fortune will be lost. The earth is my greatest ally. He sent the impostor child into the gate and waited. It wasn't long before Rosamond approached him, humming a somber song, the wreath of flowers clutched in her small hands. She seemed as fragile as the moonlight standing before him, but her green eyes held his gaze tearless and steady, her hair ribboned over her face in the wind. Though the wolf was pleased with her, he did not show it. She climbed on his back in silence, and they left. Rosamond, at this point, had barely ever ventured off her father's estate in her entire life, so the feral woods were a wonder to her. The black and green willows feathered her cheeks as the wolf ran, the pecans cracked under his paws. Everywhere around them, amethyst wisteria filled the world with its sugared perfume, and the girl inhaled it happily. When they reached the field, she had all but forgotten her fear. She ran freely through the field of campanula and poppied barefoot. The wolf was charmed, but bit his tongue. This is my land, and soon it will be ours, he said. The girl paused for a moment and smiled. What do you suppose your father would do with such a place? My father would tame this place. He would prune the forests into gardens, and lay pathways through the field and form a proper park. He would conduct business and wander among the glades in the summers. He knew he had not been deceived twice. They continued deep into the forest, engulfed in a symphony of birdsong and breezes, until they emerged from a dark ravine to find a row of black cedars that led to a great gate. The house wasn't as grand as her own, but it was surrounded with enchantments and charms that were new to her, and she marveled through each room slowly and deliberately. It's beautiful, she said. I only wish my father were here to see it. The wolf was close behind her. You will see him again in a year's time. He slipped from beneath his furry white hide. In no way was he a wolf, but a man, standing before her shining like the sun, with a striking air of satisfaction and intelligence about him. He led her to the house, out of the house to his orchards, where plum trees blanketed off the ascending sun, their fruit sugar-coating the morning air, and he carried her under them and laid her on the ground to stake his final claim on his treasure. A year passed this way. They kept the house together like it was a fairyland, and Rosamond found great joy. Each morning he stained his face with the berries and fruits from the orchard and donned his wolfskin to hunt. Rosamond busied herself with whatever brought her joy, a melody perpetually on her tongue. She cooked grand feasts for the two of them, baked decadent cakes topped with flowers from the fields, wove great garlands, raised the fire in the hearth, and when he came home, they gave themselves over to the joys of paradise. On days he stayed home, they took to the soft grass fields and cypress woods, built fragrant green fires of myrtle and cedar, and indulged in heated muscadines and berries pulled straight from the vines, before stretching themselves out and sleeping in the woods. One day he woke her lovingly. My dear, put on your best dress. Today we call on your family, but when we leave, you must leave by my side, or you will never find your way home without me. And as she dressed, so did he, staining his face with the enchanted fruits of their field, cloaking himself in wolfskin. He donned this disguise for the duration of their stay, shedding it only in the evening behind the locked doors of their bedchamber. The girl's guileful mother was untrusting of the hound, convinced that he had bewitched the beloved youngest, for how could she find happiness with a beast by her side in the wilderness? One night, she hid behind a barrel in the corner of their room. When she saw him drop the mantle to reveal his real person, she was enraged at the deception. In his heavy sleep, she scrubbed his face clean of stains. And when she cast his fur into the fire to end his artifice, she turned to the bed only to find him vanished, her daughter alone, his form still pressed in the mattress beside her. In the morning, the girl could not be consoled. She wept for her lost husband and cursed her mother before fleeing to the woods. She wandered through the forest blindly without a guide, path, or track to aid her. Days passed. She ate from the trees. The forest nurtured her as best it could, covering her with branches and moss as she slept, feeding her with its fruits, and all the while the bereaved wolf bride wept, for she knew there was no hope of finding home. On the 14th night, she fell asleep against the trunk of the oldest elm in the forest. In the moonlight, its branches woke her with his aged branches. "Why are you crying, child?" it asked. "I have lost my love, the white wolf, and I cannot find my way home." The wind and the elm consulted, waving the ancient tree from its roots to its branches and pulsing. "I have not seen the white wolf, child, but I can point you in a direction. Follow the path that unfolds before you, and do not stray from it." When Rosamond woke the next morning, thinking it all a dream, she was amazed to see a perfectly formed path before her. It took her out of the dark billowed embrace of the forest and forward again until she reached a wide marsh. Her tears met the water at her feet and stirred the fish below. They gathered around her in one giant school. "Why are you crying, dear one?" they asked. "The forest and the wind forged me a path to my love, the white wolf, but I have lost my way." The fish consulted one another and studied the murky earth below them. The unerring path was hidden there, concealed under the water. Without a word, they flocked around her and carried her across. From afar, it would have appeared as if she were flying, and at the end of the marsh she found great dunes and a clear path set out ahead, cut by the wind. The sand was not so accommodating for her. She trekked for days and nights without food or water. By the time she reached its end, her skin was so burned and so blistered and her lips so cracked that she thought she might die. But on the distant horizon, she caught a glimpse of a rolling, verdant field, covered in a delicate quilt of carmine, amaranth, and scarlet, her own field. The thought of finding her home brought her renewed strength, and she crossed the fields as if she had just departed. She was so glad to be delivered to this field that she lay down in its flowers and slept soundly. The flowers, knowing that it was her love for them and her father that had brought her here in the first place, and having admired the great love between the girl and their wolf king for so long, it readily embraced her. They held on to her so tightly that they brought her into the ground with them, down to a great river far below the earth, which carried her far and swift. When she awoke, she remembered her heartbreak and cried out in agony, only to find that when she opened her eyes, there were the very gates she had dreamt of, her hound's estate, covered in a dark cloud and overgrown with vines. From inside, she heard pained howls. She ran towards them, crying out the story of her odyssey. When she finally laid eyes on her husband, he was collapsed in front of the hearth, clutching the dried wreath he had brought her therein, not even noticing her. It withered in his white-knuckled grip. She ran towards him and held him. "My love, it was only a dream." And they held each other tightly, never to be parted again. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one more piece for you guys tonight, so I'm going to get the art queued up for it. So this is by an artist named Natalie Minnick, who clearly enjoys paper arts and mask making. She's a Georgia native, and she currently resides in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she's the production coordinator for Cambridge Community Television. And this portrait inspired a piece by Topher Payne, an unapologetic eavesdropper from Mississippi. He and his dog live in Atlanta, where they write plays, and here to read his piece is local actress, director, producer, all of these things, Veronica Durr. Veronica.
Hi, everybody. Topher wishes he could be here tonight, but he's casting a play in New York, so he's busy. Here we go. That's better. Sister Uses Her Head by Topher Payne. Our kitchen is dark all the day long. The house itself is massive and smug, built by people with plenty to prove. When you grow up poor, as Mama and Daddy certainly did, there's no end to the lengths you'll go in announcing you've arrived. But there's no reasoning with new money. Flush with the delight of bills paid and pocket money to spare, some say poverty breeds character. Not true. Poverty breeds desperation. So, a big house was erected out on a county road, more house than a family of four would ever need. Daddy, guilty for his extended absences on an oil rig, indulged Mama as she lolled about in magazines designed to make you feel about your home the way brassiere ads are designed to make you feel about your body. I wish you could have heard her wail with pleasure at the dark walnut cabinetry, The black granite floors and counters, the single skylight to, in her words, make it cheerful. The resultant room has the feel of a dark clearing in a forest where trolls and bandits lie in wait. But on clear days, a ray of sunshine stumbles upon the skylight for about 40 minutes, casting a lonely beam onto the Maytag dishwashing machine. One could fair expect the gleaming black Maytag to launch into a soft shoe routine or sing a few verses of John Henry, anything to justify its daily spotlight. My points being, our kitchen is very dark, and Mama is a silly person. My sister Anna Grace is silly by equal measure. Pretty and curvy, because she took after Mama. I'm resourceful and whip smart, because I took after nobody. My presence in the family befuddles all four of us, or three now, with Daddy in the ground. Presumably, Daddy is now befuddled with much larger notions. The three of us, the females he left behind, are gathered in the tomb of a kitchen to discuss the serious matter Anna Grace laid at my feet last night, interrupting the brushing of my teeth. I am very particular about my teeth. My extended relations serve as cautionary reminders of the importance of such things. Sister, I'm in a state, she said, breathlessly. Yet Anna Grace is perpetually gasping for air. A catfish flopping in a bucket. And I truly worry one day she'll distract herself and forget to breathe. And that's how she'll meet Jesus. I believe Border Benton tried to come after me, said Anna Grace. When? I asked. Last night, on the Davenport, she fluttered. I fell asleep watching my program, and I awoke to find his hands on my legs. Up high, and creeping higher. Did you ask him what he was up to? Yes. He said his hands were cold. But you know something, sister? I have my doubts about that. Anna Grace is 16 years old, 2 years older than me, and buck stupid. And even she wasn't fooled by the shenanigans of Border Benton. The first thing you should know is that Mama had no actual need for bringing in boarders after Daddy got killed. Men who work on oil rigs always have real good policies because it's fairly expected some travesty will befall you out there. There are more ways to get killed on an oil rig than there are fish in the sea. Daddy used to make sure his good suit was pressed before he left to do a stint, just so nobody'd have to go to too much trouble if he got sent back a course. Folks generally don't have those concerns if they work, as an example, in the supermarket. But Mama was poor once, and she would not be poor again. And she had no intention of finding a job. The dirt hadn't settled on Daddy's casket before she placed an item in the Hines County Gazette advertising rooms for let with supper included. You know, a person can take up to 3 boarders at a time before someone from the courthouse comes along to cause trouble, and that is a blessing. Because I swear to you, Mama would have had us overrun as an anthill if she could have gotten away with it. Mama, do you suppose it's wise, all these strange men coming and going? I'd asked when the first boarders came shambling into the big house. I do, sister. I find it quite wise. There are things we women cannot do for ourselves, and it will be good to have gentlemen about. Mama was raised with an ever-expanding list of that which women cannot do. And she was more than happy to believe it because doing so kept her hands free. You know, I read that in Spain, all objects are either male or female. Mama would likely be quite happy there, having everything spelled out like that. I'm a voracious reader, and I'm far too wise for my age. Everyone says so, and if they don't, I do. According to Mama, gentlemen tasks include the killing of bugs and flipping of pancakes, concerns regarding plumbing or automobiles, and fiddling with anything which gets plugged into the wall. Lady tasks, as far as Mama is concerned, have yet to be determined. Mama's own Mama, whom we called Mrs. Calloway, per her insistence, was not handsome in the slightest, but very well maintained. It's a tragedy Mama didn't take after her, even in some small way. Mrs. Calloway was a wise old crone, the lead teller at Merchants and Farmers Bank, and if you came to make a withdrawal from your savings, she'd expect you to explain yourself. And then she'd decide whether you got to have your money or not. Occasionally, folks would raise protests, but, she had such a way of explaining things so that you saw that her point of view was the only one worth considering. Anna Grace and I both feared and revered her till the day she died. And to this day, we speak of Mrs. Calloway in hushed tones. So, here we are, listening to the hum of the Energy Star Frigidaire as Anna Grace haltingly relates the story of Border Benton's wandering hands. I am present because I am nothing if not a supportive sister. And I also wish to see the look of unmitigated horror on Mama's face as she realizes she has unleashed a passel of predators into the home she shares with her teenage daughters, one of whom is fetching and slow-witted. The things that could have happened, and have, and could still. Mama's lovely face becomes sour and crestfallen in a way I thought I would enjoy very much more than I do. Anna Grace, she says at last, I'm dead curious to know how you came to be in a position for Border Benton to interfere with you in the first place. Interfere? Like he prevented her from passing him on the sidewalk or opened a certified letter. Honey, your face and your shape will take you plenty far if you use it proper. But you really can't allow yourself to be put in that sort of situation. You're lucky he didn't try to take full advantage. There is so much to explore and peruse in Mama's words. Apparently, Border Benton warming his hands on the inside of Anna Grace's thighs is considered advantageous for him, but only partially so. Mama! I wail in shock. I am stunned. You have got to do something about this. There is a wolf in this house. Anna Grace, Mama continues, swatting me away like a mosquito. Border Benton will be dealt with, but it's important you understand. You are near grown, and the world is not safe for pretty women. Friendly, certainly, but not safe. Anna Grace just sits there, brow furrowed, lips pressed tight as a clamshell, trying so very hard to understand what Mama's getting at. Well, she knows all the facts of life. Cousin Caro explained the ins of the bees and the outs of the birds to us when we were just little itty-bitties, in such shocking detail that I swore off any interest in the enterprise. Anna Grace knows where babies come from, and what feels nice and why. But no one has explained to her that some man might wish to feel nice with her whether she wants to or not. Anna Grace, I blurt. Breathe. And so she does. Now see how I have to remind her? Mama, Anna Grace finally whispers. What do you mean? We won't say another word about it, says Mama, wiping her hands on a dish towel like Pontius Pilate himself. It isn't ladylike to discuss prurient subjects. I make a mental note of that, adding it to the list of things ladies cannot do. You'd think the list were made of kudzu, how it forever grows. Now I suggest we treat this as an unpleasant memory, which we will fold up inside ourselves and forget about completely, as we do with all other unpleasant memories. Did I tell you that Mama hasn't allowed us to mention Daddy since the day we buried him? Yeah, she says we shouldn't dwell on sad things. I feel like that's something you should know about her. Day turns into night in the big house. And when we're called for supper, who should come waltzing to the table like the star attraction but Border Benton himself? Anna Grace is, as one would expect, breathless. He reaches for the basket of brown and served rolls, but I snatch them away. Boarder Benton, I say, you asked permission before you put your icy mitts on someone's bread basket. You see how that worked on two different levels? And I just pop that up right there. Well, before I could even take pleasure in his shocked, stupid face, Mama has me led by the hair into the kitchen, where she proceeds to lay out an elaborate tale of financial hardship that is true only in her vainglorious mind. She tells me Boarder Benton has been thoroughly chastised for his unseemly behavior, and that she is quite certain there will be no further incidents under our roof. Well, now she's gone and done it. Those hobos are all in cahoots, you know? At the first chance, if he hasn't already, Boarder Benton will take the little prepaid telephone with the cracked screen from his pocket and commence to tapping. He'll tap to all the vagrants in Mississippi, likely Louisiana trash across the river too, that here, in Bolton, they'll find a bounty of temptation and not a single consequence for sampling whatever they wish. Mama's benign neglect will smut Anna Grace out by summer. I'm without words, seething as I am with fury for the conceited fool charged with raising me. I excuse myself from the supper, having lost my appetite for food, for Mama, for the whole misbegotten world. Shortly, Anna Grace joins me in my bedroom on a fact-finding mission. Is it true what Mama says? That the world isn't safe for pretty girls? I give this due consideration. As much as I am loath to agree with Mama, I will concede that she has a point. Folks talk of pretty girls as they would a horse. Length of leg, quality of mane, suitability for breeding. A pretty girl in a Mississippi town is an object to covet. Something for a family to barter in their ceaseless quest for more and better. That's all Anna Grace is, really. A play pretty. We endeavor to keep unspoiled until it is decided to whom she will be bequeathed. Only ugly women get respect around these parts because it's assumed that if God was cruel to you with one hand, he must have blessed you with the other. These are the things I think. What I say it is. Supposing it is true, what do you intend to do about it? Now, I have asked Anna Grace to think for herself about what she wants and what she deserves, so the protracted silence that follows is not at all surprising. I would be so happy, she begins, but then has no idea how to finish. I wish I were an old crone, with droopy eyes and sagging cheeks. Sister, I wish I was so ugly that people cared what I had to say. For the umpteenth time today, I am lightly stunned. Well, Aunt G, I replied, using the name I haven't called her since we were babies. What would you like to say? I don't know, sister. I just like the option. In this moment, there is nothing in this world I am more certain of than my determination to give Anna Grace exactly what she wants. I am, as I told you already, a most devoted sister. We pull a heap of discarded boxes from the blue rolling bin out in the carport. Anna Grace dusts off the conjoined pots from a long forgotten paint-by-number set. We set about our task of one mind, cutting and coloring and gluing until it begins to emerge. A face, looming and large like the grandmother of one of those Easter Island statues. We have constructed for Anna Grace a mask of authority, something to protect her from the prettiness in a house filled with danger. Were I to be objective on its aesthetics, I would call it interesting and crude and wise. Everything a woman aspires to be but cannot begin to imagine how. The head slips right over Anna Grace's own, like a spaceman's helmet. She looks in the mirror, it doesn't make a sound. Anna Grace, can you breathe in there? Yes, sister. I can. And to prove it true, she fills her lungs with the deepest breath I have ever heard from her. And then expels a long, contented Rhoda Benton won't be touching me again, sister. I am a wise old crow, and I won't stand for it. Anna Grace's words proved to be prophetic. She'll take to wearing the head around the house for the remainder of springtime, delighting both in the wide berth she's afforded by the boarders, and especially in the horrific reaction from Mama, who will plead with her to remove it. Anna Grace will reply that she's only trying to keep herself safe, a pretty girl in a dangerous house, as Mama had advised. After months of this, Mama will steal into her room late one evening, take the head, and burn it on the refuse pile. But Anna Grace won't even give her the satisfaction of a fit about it. That head will have already served its purpose. It will have given her time to think. Time to realize she has the right to. Within a year, she'll leave the big house and never return. I'll follow in her wake a little bit after, and Mama will become an unpleasant memory we fold up inside ourselves and forget about completely. Anna Grace and me, we will go out into the world and we will become wise old crows. I can see all of this as I stand beside my sister in the mirror, watching her find her breath for the very first time. Thank you.
Did anybody else get goosebumps when you realized how the mask was going to figure into the story? I got goosebumps. Still, and I've read it so many times. So thank you to all of you for coming. Let's give a hand one more time to our readers. Thank you to Joe and Zach at the Georgia Center for the book, and to the Decatur Library for being such a great home for these paintings for the next couple months. They're going to go upstairs on August 1st. And they're going to be up there through the end of September, so please come by, bring your friends, take them all in. And does anybody have any questions or anything? Cool. Well, the books are back there if you want to get one. Thanks so much for coming out, and I hope that you enjoyed it.